It's time for the Week 5 running back rankings. The season is flying by already. We're going to be, past or at like a quarter of the... We're going to be, past a quarter of the season after this week. You got to get some wins if you haven't gotten too many yet. And I think it's okay to make some drastic changes with your rosters this week. You got to take some risks sometimes, so... I think it's okay to take some risks this week. That being said, in the video today, we will go through my top 31 running backs. You can find my complete rankings, and they are also included as my projections. I have expected ranges for you that you will see in this video. They're all up on the website, www.theffforge.com. Link down in the description and right above me as well, as you can see the website there. So go check that out. I do keep those rankings updated throughout the week, and you can always come visit me live 1 hour prior to kickoff on Sunday. I might start doing Thursdays, but I also, this past Sunday, I went live just a half hour prior to the morning game. So when the games are in London, which I assume there is another one, there is this weekend in London, I'll pop on for a quick half hour there if you have any questions for start sit needs then. Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. It's time to get started, and before we truly get started, let's go over my Week 4 recap. So last week I said that I would pay for DeAndre Swift at $5,700. I didn't go through and double check if these were worth it. Didn't think that was very expensive for him. I believe that probably paid off. I don't think he had a massive week or anything, but at that price should have been fine. Said if you wanted to go contrarian, that I bet most people would avoid Breece Hall. Oh god, considering he's a fair bit more expensive than Josh Kelly, Dameon Pierce, Jalen Warren, or Roschon Johnson, who I also like the cost of. So that did not work out, I don't believe. And then a big tournament long shot, Isaiah Spiller, for as low as you can go at running back at $4,000. His usage quadrupled last week. Maybe they'll give him give up on Josh Kelly if Josh Kelly were to have a slow start. So that didn't really happen, but it was a long shot anyways, and that's what that long shot spot is for. My love-ems were DeAndre Swift, Roschon Johnson. Roschon did not come through. DeAndre Swift was fine. My fadems were Joe Mixon and Brian Robinson Jr. Regardless of the end of the day results for Joe Mixon, for some reason I don't recall off the top of my head, we're just going to call that a failure for my fadems. Let's get to Week 5, and you can find my my love'ems and my fadems will be said throughout the video, and my DFS plays will be at the end of the video. Let's get started with my first tier of running backs here. We'll reveal them. It's going to be the top 11 running backs. So over here, this color is a heat gauge. So red is going to be like hot or a good matchup. Blue would be cold or a bad matchup. That's including PFF scores for the individual player. Just like one PFF score, their overall, like how they are as a runner score, as well as the Las Vegas lines for these as of Tuesday. And also the matchup, the team that they're going up against, how many fantasy points they've led up against the position, are really what goes into this little recipe here that gives us this coloring, and then they're all compared to each other to figure out how bright the red is or how deep the blue is. And over here we have my projected expected range that these players will end the week within scoring wise, and then I do also have ceilings and floors. So if you're looking for a ceiling play, you think that you're in a deep hole this week against your opponent and you just need that ceiling shot, you can go check those out, once again up on the website. Or if you just want to play the safest floor, I do have floors as well there, and that'll give you an idea of who might be safer than somebody else. So let's get kicking. My number 1 running back is Christian McCaffrey. Number 2, Bijan Robinson going up against Houston. Josh Jacobs at 3. Devon A-Chain at 4. So I do have some interesting decisions that I made here up at the top, and that is in part because of these projections. And these projections, you do have to use your brain when looking at these projections. Don't just fully take them at face value. They don't know everything. They are based upon what these players have done throughout the season and based upon what these defenses have done throughout the season. And so especially when you see like the ceilings against Denver, those are quite high right now because of all of the points that Denver led up to running backs just a couple of weeks ago. But Devon Achane did have another great week last week, and it's hard to imagine that there's not a good chance of having another great week going up against the New York Giants. And as you can see, David Montgomery is going to be a love 'em for me this week going up against Carolina. Carolina has allowed the 4th most fantasy points on average to the running back position. Detroit opened up as 8.5-point favorites against Carolina this week, which works in favor for the rushing attack, of course, and most notably, it works more in favor for David Montgomery than it does for Jahmyr Gibbs. Just given game flow, David Montgomery is kind of the guy that you use to run out clock and just keep the ball in your hands instead of, you don't need the big play or anything like that. So I expect him to have another good game looking a lot like he did against Green Bay, quite possibly. Then I have DeAndre Swift in as my running back 6, Travis Etienne at running back 7, Tony Pollard in at running back 8, and I just want to say about Dallas this week going up against San Francisco might be a good thing for them. Yes, San Fran's a good defense, and Dallas also has a good defense, but they also both have good offenses, and Dallas's offensive playmakers really haven't had to do a lot through the first 4 weeks, and for the most part through these matchups, a lot hasn't been asked for them, and so the fantasy points haven't been great. But I think that what they really need is a challenge and to go up against a good opponent that can keep this game close against them and hopefully keep the ball out of their defense, just getting touchdowns for them. And so I'm actually thinking that this matchup could be a good thing for these Dallas playmakers. Hopefully, of course, San Fran is a good defense, but I kind of like it more than I don't like it. Then we have Kyren Williams in at my running back 9, Derrick Henry at 10, and we get a sneak peek at the top of my next tier, but Brian Robinson to clear off these must-start guys. There's really no way that you can get me to sit Brian Robinson this week. They're opened up as 5.5-point favorites against Chicago, and so it's just a must-start situation for me for Brian Robinson. That's going to bring us into my second tier, and these are the guys that maybe you don't love the situation or the player or whatever quite as much as those must-starts. I'm going to call them the start because you must kind of crew here. So we have James Cook in at my running back 12 and Aaron Jones in at running back 13 going up against Las Vegas. It'd really be tough for me to sit Aaron Jones this week. Expect him to be healthier and get a good amount of workload in a good matchup against Las Vegas. Then at running back 14, Saquon Barkley. If he's a go, I am concerned, but unless the words heavily limited are also being tossed around with his name ahead of kickoff or something like that, I think you just absolutely have to give him a go against Miami. Expect Miami to score quite a bit against this defense and give the ball back into this offensive's hands, and hopefully that offensive line can hold up a little bit better, and the addition of Saquon Barkley as well should help that offense. So, I think you just you start him because you must, basically. Then James Conner in at my running back 15 going up against Cincinnati. And is it just me, or is Arizona like the team that should be favored in this game? Vegas's line opened up with them as 4.5-point dogs against Cincinnati, but I feel like Vegas is being a little bit slow on the uptick and the downtick of a couple of teams so far this season. They're buying into some other teams a little bit more, but I understand their hesitancy to buy on it, but that might be a good place to go win some money from Vegas, honestly. I like Arizona this week, which would be a good situation for James Conner then if they're in the lead in this game. That always helps. He does have the 9th highest floor this week, and I'm guessing that Cincinnati hasn't allowed much for rushing touchdowns, and that's what's holding back the ceilings, and the higher expected range is just a touch. I did not go and double check to look into that if that's what's holding that back, but that would definitely explain it if so. And at running back 16, Joe Mixon, and at running back 17, I have Alvin Kamara. So talk a little bit about both of them. Joe Mixon going up against Arizona. I'm nervous about both of them to some extent, but as far as Joe Mixon goes, Arizona they have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position on average per week, so not a bad spot for Joe Mixon as far as that goes. But as I just said, kind of expecting Arizona to be in the lead. And then what you're hoping for is a bunch of dump downs. And that's what I wrote about Alvin Kamara as well. Basically, hopefully their quarterbacks check down to them a bunch. Burrow, being in his situation, and Carr probably still hampered with that AC joint that they just didn't simply want to let him heal for a week or two. Expect that to probably still hamper him, maybe not to the same extent this upcoming week, which could actually be a good thing for Kamara. But I really don't like the floor for Kamara going up against New England. It's a scary floor for me in that situation with a, once again, I think still hampered quarterback. And now we're going to move on to my third tier, and these are what I'm going to call the hopeful starts. And I'm hopeful that these guys will have good days for one reason or another. So Raheem Mostert in at running back 18, I think he's going to continue to have a role on this offense, and this could be another game where the running backs carry the day for Miami. So I'm optimistic about him having a good week this week and the chances that he gets at least one touchdown. I like it enough. Then Isaiah Pacheco is at my running back 19. Minnesota has allowed 13.9 fantasy points to running backs on average through the first 4 weeks, putting them just inside the bottom 10 at defense number 10 for running back matchups. Minnesota's secondary sucks, so that's where teams have been attacking them. And I say that just to say that I don't think that this Minnesota rushing defense is something fantastic or anything like that. Top 10 in the league. I don't really think they're that. I just think that is how teams have been attacking them. Then at running back 20, I have Breece Hall, and he is going to be a love him for me this week. Going up against Denver, I think that this could be a breakout week for Breece Hall. 2 weeks ago, we saw Breece Hall get a good workload, get a good chunk of the work, and last week we saw a few moments of vintage Breece Hall, just kind of like we saw in week 1, a little bit of that. And I think that the team just decided last week to not even try and run against Kansas City at all. Would have liked to see a little bit more receiving work for Breece Hall, but I think he's primed and ready to go in a fantastic matchup against Denver to have a good game. And there'll be a little bit more on Denver later. Then I have, if Jonathan Taylor's playing, I'll slot him right in where I have Zach Moss currently. Zach Moss I have ranked 21st, Alexander Madison 22nd, Khalil Herbert 23rd. So as far as these guys go, JT on down to Khalil Herbert, you'll probably have to play them, and they could definitely have good days. But the matchup situation isn't really great for them, as you can see from the coloring there from my little heat gauge. I think that they're going to need touchdowns in order to have good days in this matchup. That's really what it comes down to. Let's move on to my next tier, which is a tiny tier. Starting off at running back 24, we have Ramondre Stevenson, followed by Miles Sanders at running back 25, 26, Dameon Pierce, and Gus Edwards. And this is the must-I start tier. So, Ramondre Stevenson, my number 1 running back. Still 3-1, baby. And Ramondre didn't help, and he hasn't helped all season long. He has the 17th highest floor, though, on the bright side this week at 3.8 fantasy points for my floors and ceilings. So, that is something to look forward to. Not a goose egg, at least. And I actually should take a moment to mention that the floors, the ceilings, they're not absolute floors and absolute ceilings. They're just expected floors, expected ceilings. Obviously, players could have bigger days or lesser days. It's just trying to give you an idea of about where a really good day would look like or a really poor day should look like for those players. Anyways, Ramondre going up against New Orleans defense. Really, I think it's another poopy week for Ramondre Stevenson, but things should start to look brighter next week, so hold on to him. And if you can avoid playing him, then do so. As far as Miles Sanders goes, Detroit's run defense is no joke, and the same thing can be said about Atlanta's run defense that Dameon Pierce will be going up against. They're not really a joke either. And then Gus Edwards in at my running back 27, and I dropped him last week. No one picked him up. He's sitting there on my waiver wire, and I'm seriously considering picking him up and starting him over Ramondre Stevenson. To me, this just feels like the type of game where like Baltimore should be able to really whoop up on Pittsburgh in this week. And if so, then it seems like it would be another week where Gus Edwards would get a lot of work and a lot of opportunities. And so then I like the floor, I like the ceiling, my projections and everything. Don't mimic the fact that he has a high floor, but I think he does this week. Just a little bit concerned about Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, but this is the type of matchup where I'm a little less concerned about them. And that's going to bring us to the final tier. This is going to be the YOLO tier. Like, you're in a pinch, you got to start somebody. and you just YOLO it. Give them a shot. So that's going to start off at my running back 28 with Jahmyr Gibbs. Going up against Carolina. I talked about the Carolina defense. It's a good matchup. And you'll see that the Heat Gauge loves him this week, but the Heat Gauge doesn't really know that, like, you know, the player to love in this offense in this kind of game situation is really David Montgomery. We should like Jahmyr Gibbs more so when their Heat Gauge is going to be like a stone cold blue. Then that's a situation where Jahmyr Gibbs could come in and get a lot more work. We haven't really seen that for Detroit yet this year. Then Javonte Williams is going to be my second fadeum. And if he does not play, Jaleel McLaughlin would be in the tier above this. At the very least, potentially I would have him as high as running back 22, right ahead of Alexander Mattison. So as far as Denver, I said I'd talk a little bit about them. I don't have a good feeling about this Denver team this week. Most notably, I never have a good feeling about their defense this season. I highly doubt I will. But their offense has been stringing it together and has been all right up until this point in the season. The thing for me with Javonte Williams is that I don't like Denver this week, which means I don't really like the running game. And I haven't liked what I've seen from him a whole lot. So that's why I would put Jaleel McLaughlin over him, is because I think Jaleel at least gives them a little bit of pop and some juice that he can maybe break something open and just do something for this offense in a game where maybe they're not doing so hot. But I think he gives them a little bit more than Javonte, who's probably going to be even more banged up than he came into the season this week if he is a go. That said, I do want to make it clear, and this Heat Gauge kind of tells you that slightly off-white, a little bit red there, that the New York Jets are not a poor matchup. They're a decent matchup. They're slightly better than middle of the road as far as matchups go. Then Tyler Algier is going to be going up against Houston. It's a good matchup there. Houston has been pretty bad against running backs, so there's a decent chance for Algier to have one of those little pop-off games. I'm sure he'll have more than just week one this season. The first few possessions in this game, I think, are probably going to really determine how this game goes, and thus how the fantasy points end up getting distributed between these two teams. If Atlanta can come out and play some smash-mouth football, keep Houston's offense off of the clock for those first two possessions and get some points on the board in those possessions and start to make the Houston offense a little bit more one-dimensional early in the game, then I think that this could be a really, really good day, and that's where we see Tyler Algier potentially pop off. The other situation is they don't quite do that. Maybe a 3-and-out. Houston has a nice drive, gets a touchdown, and they start to play from behind, and that's not a good thing, and that would be good for Houston because otherwise, it could be a long day for the Houston defense and thus not a whole lot of opportunities for that Houston offense. Then we have Kenny G to wrap up this video at running back 31. Well, not quite the video. We have DFS buys yet after this, but Philadelphia opened up as 5.5-point favorites in this. If Kupp does not return this week, that could go a long ways towards Kenny G getting more opportunities down the stretch. He does get some opportunities in these games. And so it's not an excellent matchup, but they are supposed to be able to beat the Rams fairly handedly. We'll see. Los Angeles Rams have been a feisty defense. So let's move on to the DFS buys. And my pay for 'em player this week, not really top cost, but at $6,600. I love David Montgomery, given where I have him ranked. That's a good value. If you want to go the contrarian route, I think Raheem Mostert at $6,200, being only $100 more, one spot ahead of Devon A-Chain on the list for DK, is your contrarian play. I think most people will probably pick A-Chain in that situation, being $100 cheaper, essentially being Miami's starter if he's not their starter, and just being the more exciting player and the more successful player as of late. Then for a big tournament long shot, I think everybody's going to be on top of McLaughlin if Javonte Williams is not a go. But if you really want to take a long shot, then Justice Hill could still be the guy in Baltimore / this game could be over quickly, and maybe Hill gets quite a bit more involved than last week where he was coming off an injury, and maybe he just wasn't very involved in that game plan that they had for that game. And that is it for the video. So stay tuned for wide receiver, quarterback, and tight end videos coming out through the week. Tight end videos come out on Friday because that's the simplest position, but I will give out on Thursday morning when I release my wide receiver video. I do give out my thoughts on the tight ends in that matchup and just let you know, you should probably play this guy or not. And that is it. So peace out. Thank you very much. Goodbye. Love you. Like my video, please.